Belisarius Cawl, Archmagos Dominus of the Adeptus Mechanicus, who is now 10,000 years old. He is one of the ruling lords of the priesthood of Mars. Cawl played a key role in the events of the 13th Black Crusade, the Celestinian Crusade, and the Terran Crusade. Alongside Ivrain, he resurrected Primarch Robut Guilliman, who became the Lord Regent of the Imperium. Additionally, Cawl is responsible for the creation of the Primaris Space Marines, numerous new Imperial technologies in the field of weaponry, and the triumphant success of the Indomitus Crusade. Now we will tell you more about him, and you will understand why he can be called one of the greatest servants of mankind. Bounding into battle on numerous metallic legs, Belisarius Cawl is a nightmarish amalgam of flesh and machine beneath the red robes of Mars. Millennia of excessive self-enhancement have turned Cawl into a grotesque being, whose outlandish body towers several times higher than an ordinary human. The Archmagos Dominus can unleash firepower capable of destroying tanks, while panicked retaliatory fire bounces off a humming power field. Many of Cawl's appendages end in glowing synergistic weaponry, piston-driven claws, and dangerous armaments capable of prying open a tank like a tin can. Beneath his hood lie unified ocular lenses, whose insect-like gaze mercilessly identifies every weakness of his prey. Cawl, being a master of diverse binary code of lingua technis, can breathe new life into the machine's spirit or stop its reactor heart with a single phrase. His greedy grasp reaches for any secret, and anyone who tries to deprive Cawl of his coveted prize soon finds themselves reduced to hot ash, scattered by the wind. Archmagos Dominus Belisarius Cawl remembers the times of the Horus heresy, although it is unknown how he managed to live so long. Even the most advanced rejuvenation and augmentative systems cannot normally sustain the organic human mind over such a long period. The tech priest served Mars and the machine god in the capacity of Forge Lord and Lexico Arcanus, but his true mastery is revealed in his role as a Magos Biologis. It can be said with a clear conscience that the ancient Archmagos Dominus has forgotten more knowledge, especially regarding genetics, than the most gifted scientists could ever hope to grasp. Cawl was born on Mars at the beginning of the 31st millennium. He was created in the birthing facilities of Xanthiterra, controlled by Magos Biologis Hamareth. Like most Martian children, he was vat-born, and at the time of his birth already was physically and mentally a young adolescent. However, unlike most Martian children, he was able to speak normally at the time of his birth, a result of absorbing more fully the data uploaded into all Mechanicum fetuses while he was gestating. The first confirmed appearance of Cawl in Imperial history occurred during the Horus heresy, when he was a tech acolyte on the Mechanicum world of Trisolian A4 in the Trisolian system. He was trained under the Magos Domina Hester Aspertia Sigma, who considered himself an expert in the art of soul fusion. Essentially, this was nothing more than the digital duplication of the mind and personality of another being, with the ability to merge them with others using cybernetic implants. At that time, Cawl's best friend and closest companion was his fellow tech priest, Friedrich Adam Ship Kuvo. Belisarius was the only student mastering the technology of soul fusion. He revered the Emperor as the Omnicia, according to the theological stance of the Orthodox Mechanicum, yet he disagreed with most of the other organizational dogmas. Cawl believed that the true pursuit of knowledge lay in the striving for new technologies, rather than the ritualized and mindless maintenance of the Imperium's existing technological base. The tech priest believed in the superiority of the human form, as taught by the Emperor, and rejected many of the conspicuous cybernetic modifications commonly employed by other tech priests. Nevertheless, at the same time, the young Cawl secretly subjected his brain to forbidden surgical enhancements to augment his mental capabilities. During the attack on the Trisolian system by traitor forces led by Horus himself, Cawl was betrayed when his mistress Hester Aspertia Sigma defected to the service of the War Master. The sight of the chaos-corrupted Primarch filled Belisarius with disgust, but he feigned subservience to the ruinous power's servants to survive. Later, in the battle to reclaim control over Trisolian A4, Cawl and Friedrich Adam Ship Cuveau managed to kill Aspertia Sigma Sigma for her betrayal, after which they fled from the system. Before escaping, Belisarius fused his own mind with the intellectual core of Aspertia Sigma Sigma, thus acquiring her mastery in soul fusion and cloning. Cawl and Friedrich managed to escape from the Trisolian system and find refuge on Terra, where Cawl had been recalled under a pretext by Ezekiel Sedaine, the brilliant geneticist and the second director of the biotechnical division, whose main task was creating and improving the genetic lines of the Legiones Astartes. In reality, Sedaine was so old that even rejuvenation treatments were no longer extending his life. Desperate to achieve immortality so that he could continue his work for the Emperor, Sedaine simply wanted Cawl's knowledge of cloning and soul merging, in the belief that if his psyche was added to Cawl's mind, his personality would re-emerge as the dominant one. To this end, he ordered his servant named Altrix Herminia to shoot Friedrich. The geneticist promised to restore the life of Cawl's companion if the tech priest agreed to use the soul fusion technology to merge their consciousnesses within Belisarius's body. In this way, Sedaine would be able to live forever. However, after the completion of the fusion procedure within the shared consciousness of the geneticist and the tech priest, the personality of Cawl, rather than that of Sedaine, ultimately prevailed. Upon awakening, Cawl experienced the old memories of the geneticist of how he first encountered the Emperor of Mankind during the early stages of the Unification Wars. When the Emperor saw the geneticist, he addressed him as Belisarius Cawl, and not as Sedaine. Thanks to his powerful psychic abilities, he foresaw the ultimate fate of Sedaine hundreds of years before it transpired. In these memories, the Emperor explained to the Cawl of the future that it was the tech priest's responsibility to continue his work. Cawl must not cease his efforts, even when he believes he has betrayed everything the Emperor fought for. The very thought of betraying the Emperor horrified the young Belisarius. Following the conclusion of the Horus Heresy, Robert Guilliman, who had become the first Lord Commander of the Imperium, ordered Cawl to accomplish two things should the Primarch fall. The first was the creation of a set of life-sustaining armor known as the Armor of Fate. The other was the preservation of the Emperor's sword, the blade given to Guilliman by the Master of Mankind himself, and which contained a fragment of his divine power. Cawl's expertise in genetics, which he acquired after the soul fusion with merger, alongside the purest genetic material within a device known as the Sang Primus Portum, enabled Cawl to successfully create the Primaris Space Marines and establish the Ultima founding in the year 999 of the 41st millennium. This achievement marked the culmination of his 10,000-year endeavor to perfect the Emperor's creation. However, over the course of the intervening 10 millennia, Cawl had profoundly changed. The tech priest, who once despised the extensive cybernetic augmentations used by other tech adepts, began slowly altering his body, and eventually Belisarius became more machine than man. He began to combine more psyches within his own cybernetic intelligence core, using the soul-merging technology. Ultimately, the Archmagos transformed into an entity composed of an intricate weave of souls, rather than a coalition of minds. Additionally, Cawl began to lose his memory as he was forced to purge his intelligence core of data approximately every 500 standard years due to its limited capacity. Despite the memory loss, Cawl underwent mind-wiping twice, not to mention frequent data purges. He remains a tech savant, a genius at the forefront of whatever field to which he turns his mind. Even within the ranks of the Adeptus Mechanicus, where artificial devices extraordinarily enhance intellectual abilities and extend lifespans, such a level of knowledge in various disciplines is exceptionally rare. The priesthood of Mars bestows such individuals with the title of the prime conduits of the Omnicia, or Dominatus Dominus, Master of Masters. Among all currently living holders of such a title, Cawl is the most active in his endeavors. Cawl dedicates himself to a multitude of projects, his mind leaping from the construction of Mars' largest macromag cannon to perfecting his stasis fieldwork, or to the endless experiments he conducts within his city-sized laboratories housed in Mars' extensive underground complexes. Most of these undertakings are carried out in secret. Belisarius has so many parallel projects that he had to create his own independent minds to monitor them and hide them from the countless enemies. Deep within sealed vaults, countless experiments await the scrutinizing gaze of Cawl's multifaceted servo eyes. Upon reloading some of his stored memories, the ancient tech priest becomes distracted. Thus, it often takes several solar decades for him to recover within his own stasis crypts. Nevertheless, such prolonged periods of inactivity inspire Cawl to once again embark on the quest for knowledge. At such times, Cawl dons the mantle of Archmagos Dominus, gathering about him Skitari legions and maniples of the Legio Cybernetica. Though his home world is Mars, other Forge worlds often lend their forces to Belisarius's command, asking only that he shares with them his accumulated knowledge. On the battlefield, Cawl is a force to be reckoned with, as he fearlessly rushes into the heart of combat. Most of the enemy fire is halted by his force field, but even if an adversary manages to sever a part of Belisarius's mechanized body, reparation capillaries immediately emerge to perform repairs or attack any enemies nearby. The hunched figure of the Archmagos Dominus teems with activity, cogitators calculating fire angles and transmitting orders to warriors. The tech priest himself remains serene even at the center of raging battle, simultaneously assessing threats, predicting enemy attacks and calculating the chances of victory. Belisarius Cawl has developed a dozen new weapons units and revealed dozens of standard template constructs, STC databases. In his quest for knowledge, he has traversed the galaxy, having once even visited the Eye of Terror. Malfunctions, erasures and jumbled bibelots have left vast holes in Cawl's ancient memories, but what remains fills vaulted halls the size of a battle cruiser. There are mountains of information and compiled binary code scripts from hundreds of Xenos races, which the Archmagos had a hand in exterminating, to schematics of parts from extraordinary machines lost since the age of technology. There is nothing like this repository of knowledge, where one can find anything from galactic censuses of the Great Crusade era to research works on communication problems after the formation of the Great Rift. This information cache is so extensive that even after 10,000 years, Cawl cannot recall how much of the recovered data it holds. Even despite his recent great achievement, the successful creation of the Primaris Space Marines and the execution of the Ultima Founding, Archmagos Cawl believed that he was now engaged in even more important experiments. During the 13th Black Crusade, in the year 999 of the 41st millennium, Cawl, who commanded the Arch Mechanicus Iron Revenant and a large Mechanicus fleet, including Skitari warriors and powerful Cataphron battle servitors, directed them to the world of Eriad VI, was guided by the Eldari Harlequin Shadowseer Silandri Veilwalker. This planet had formerly been an Imperial Navy base, abandoned during the Fourth Black Crusade in the 32nd millennium. The Imperials were unaware that Eriad VI was also a Necron tomb world. After battling the Orcs, who were attracted by the prospect of fighting a mighty Mechanicus fleet on a deserted world, Cawl discovered an ancient Necron artifact. He also learned more about the nature of the Cadian pylons that had been originally built by the Necrons to contain breaches from the Immaterium, particularly the Eye of Terror, into real space. Cawl reluctantly followed the enigmatic directions of the Shadowseer, who instructed the Archmagos to proceed to Cadia. The fortress world was already under siege by the vast chaos forces of Abaddon the Despoiler, so Cawl's timely arrival provided much-needed reinforcements to the forces of Lord Castellan Osaka Creed. Equipped with the knowledge imparted from the Eriad VI, Cawl began to study the local Xenopylons. During the Archmagos' research, the Necron overlord Trazyn the Infinite suddenly appeared, deciding to aid humanity in their struggle against their mutual enemy in the warp. Although Belisarius was troubled by the Necron's motives, his fascination with the advanced pylon technology overcame his hostility towards the Xenos, and Cawl agreed to accept Trazyn's assistance. With the Necron's knowledge at his side, Belisarius was able to discern how to use the pylons to cut off a limited area of space and time from the Immaterium. When the ground battle between the forces of the Despoiler and Osaka Creed's defenders reached its zenith, Cawl activated the pylons. The Necron technology worked as expected, severing Cardia from the warp, banishing the roaring demons of chaos, reducing the size of the Eye of Terror, and granting the defenders hope for a miraculous victory. Unfortunately, the despoiler was not about to retreat from his long-cherished goal he had pursued for thousands of years. The far-seeing Abaddon utilized the damaged Blackstone fortress of Will of Eternity, whose systems had been previously disabled by the Imperial Fist's Phalanx Star Fort, and hurled it onto the surface of Cardia like an artificial asteroid. With colossal force, the kinetic strike obliterated what remained of the planet's defenses, which were immediately engulfed by the rapidly expanding Eye of Terror. Lord Castellan Creed issued the order for the evacuation from the dying world. The surviving Imperials on Cadia were led by Cawl, St. Celestine, Inquisitor Katarina Greyfax, and Marshal Marius Amalrich of the Black Templars. These forces, which came to be known as the Celestinian Crusade, utilized the Void ships at their disposal, including the Iron Revenant, and saved 3 million people from Cadia. Due to the boiling instability and the warp in the region of the Cadian Gate, entering the webway was impossible, so the Imperial fleet had to flee through the entire Cadian system at sublight speeds. With Chaos war fleets on their tail, the largest and most powerful capital ship of the Imperials, the Iron Revenant of Cawl, heroically sacrificed itself in battle against Abaddon's flagship, the Vengeful Spirit, so that the remaining part of the Celestinian Crusade could reach Clysus, the nearest icy moon of the world, Kasserholm. The Iron Revenant's loss was not in vain, as the arrival of the Inari, emerging from a hidden webway portal on Clysus, saved the surviving Celestinians from chaos and the harsh Arctic conditions. Despite the loss of their flagship, Cawl managed to salvage its most valuable cargo, the armor of fate necessary for the resurrection of the Primarch Robut Guilliman. The Eldari guided the Celestinians through the webway to the realm of Ultramar on the eastern fringes of the galaxy, though this region was also a target of fierce assault by the forces of the Despoiler. Despite initial suspicion, the Ultramarines delivered the Celestinians to Macragge. In the fortress of Hera, Cawl finally revealed the nature of the artifacts from his auto-reliquary. He proclaimed that they were intended to save the Primarch Robut Guilliman from the mortal wound that had trapped him in stasis for 10,000 years. Despite a powerful assault on the local Primarch's shrine by the forces of Chaos, Cawl continued working with Yvraine to resurrect the Primarch. After Guilliman was released from stasis, he expelled the invaders from Ultramar and decided to journey to Terra through warp anomalies raging across the galaxy, the likes of which had not been seen since the Horus Heresy. Cawl joined the Primarch, his technological expertise and combat abilities assisting the Imperial forces of the Crusade in overcoming all obstacles and threats posed by the warp rift known as the Maelstrom. Escaping from confinement in the Blackstone fortress held by the Red Corsairs, the survivors reached the Sol system via the webway and arrived in the Sol system at Luna. After being rescued by the fallen angel Cypher and the remains of the Harlequins, Cawl was one of the few Imperials to survive both the Celestinian and the Terran Crusades. The remaining forces of the Crusade helped defeat the Thousand Sons Traitor Legion and the demonic Primarch Magnus, the Red on the Luna, and then Cawl and his allies finally arrived at the Imperial Palace on Terra. There, before the Eternity Gate of the Inner Palace, which led to the Emperor's throne room where Guilliman met his father for the first time in 10,000 years, Cawl spoke to his Mechanicus colleagues and the Primarch himself. His words were shrouded in mystery. Archmagos mentioned some secret agreements on the Red Planet and long work finally nearing completion. Satisfied, Cawl left Guilliman and returned to his forge on Mars to oversee the completion of the projects. Essentially, Cawl's work on Mars was nothing less than an attempt to improve upon the creation of the Emperor himself. For 10 standard millennia, Archmagos Dominus had been striving to accomplish another task given to him by Primarch Robut Guilliman, before he was mortally wounded by the demonic Primarch Fulgrim, who had followed the heresy of Horus, the creation of a new legion of superhuman warriors. In the time after the Terran Crusade, the Imperium was on the brink of collapse as chaos threatened to utterly destroy it, but Cawl managed to finish his project. The Primaris Space Marines were a new generation of superhuman warriors that Cawl had been developing on Mars for 10,000 years. The starting point for the new Astartes development was the genetic template of the Space Marines that the Emperor had originally created for his Great Crusade. The Primaris Space Marines are larger, stronger, and faster than regular Astartes. They were forged during the so-called Ultima founding in the year 999 of the 41st millennium, as new heroes for the darkest age in the history of the Imperium of Man. These warriors are the next step in the evolution of the Emperor's Angels of Death, a timely reinforcement for the Emperor's army. By Cawl's command, new equipment was forged on Mars for them, such as Mark X power armor, combining the most effective elements of pre-Horus Heresy armor with recent advancements in power armor, bolt rifles, an advanced version of the iconic Astartes weapon, plasma incinerators, Redemptor dreadnoughts, the Overlord gunship, and repulsor grav tanks. These warriors joined the indomitable crusade called by Guilliman to push back the forces of chaos and liberate scattered bastions of Imperial space. Guilliman created new chapters of Space Marines, composed entirely of Primaris Marines, while others he assigned to existing chapters. Many chapter masters gladly welcomed the Primaris into their ranks, rejoicing in the new reinforcements. Others, however, view them with suspicion or open hostility, believing that mere mortals should never interfere with the Emperor's work. Though the Primaris differ from their brethren, they also carry the gene seed of the Primarchs, and some, disagreeing with the concerns, speak of how these new warriors will react to the known genetic flaws and defects of certain chapters, such as the Blood Angels and the Space Wolves. The Primaris Space Marines have given the beleaguered Imperium hope, but the future remains a dark and uncertain place. After the first century of the 42nd millennium, when the unstoppable crusade was nearing its inevitable conclusion, Cawl was granted full freedom in the realm of technological discoveries that could help the forces of the Imperium finally repel the tides of chaos. Cawl was permitted to use new technologies and configurations of ancient devices to refit Guilliman's flagship, the Macragge's Honor. The ancient Archmagos became the sole source of technological innovations for the Imperium throughout the century-long unstoppable crusade, creating several new types of equipment and weaponry to arm the formidable legions of Primaris Space Marines and the original chapters of the firstborn Adeptus Astartes. In the first century of the 42nd millennium, Cawl practically vanished from the galaxy's expanse, focusing on creating and improving the Primaris Space Marines. He sought to convince Guilliman to allow him to use the gene seed of the forbidden genetic lines of the traitor legions, and even the long-lost 2nd and 11th legions. However, the Primarch responded to Cawl with a categorical rejection and ordered the Archmagos to cease further investigation in this direction, although he knew that Belisarius would likely begin working independently with legal lines. Guilliman was no fool, for he knew how greedy the inquisitive members of the Adeptus Mechanicus could be. Once they possessed something, they rarely refrained from using it. In this particular case, the Primarch completely distrusted Cawl. Moreover, Cawl had asked Guilliman several times to make him the Fabricator General of Mars. As the Lord Commander of the Imperium, the Primarch, having assumed the regency, had removed 5 High Lords of Terror and hundreds of lesser High Lords. What difference did it make if he removed one more? But Guilliman asserted that the Imperium did not possess such strong political control over the Red Planet according to the ancient Treaty of Mars. Therefore, even if the Primarch could appoint his own Fabricator General, other tech priests would never accept him. Cawl argued that over the last 10,000 years he had worked in the Primarch's interests, single-handedly comprehending and perfecting the Emperor's work. Belisarius was the only one who became an expert in 100 fields of technology and who was unafraid of new discoveries. The ancient Archmagos considered himself the best candidate to rule Mars. Guilliman contemplated this course of action, But such a decision would have incited open civil war within the Adeptus Mechanicus sub-empire of the Forge Worlds. Many of Cawl's colleagues would not have agreed with such an appointment, especially considering Belisarius's numerous flagrant violations of the cult Mechanicus tenets, prohibited trade with Xenos and the use of forbidden technologies. They would not have welcomed this decision favourably if they had known the whole truth about the Archmagos' actions. In fact, many tech priests despised Belisarius Cawl. Archmagos believed that they were driven by envy, for he possessed far more knowledge than they did. Some would try to destroy Cawl and his creations. By the end of the Indomitus Crusade, a small group of devoted tech priests of the Mechanicus had formed around Belisarius. They are obedient servants of the Archmagos, who readily assist Cawl on his new radical path called the Innovation. However, the violation of the Adeptus Mechanicus dogma has also resulted in many enemies among the traditionalists and conservatives for Cawl. Such growing political resistance began to cause Guilliman concern about his ally, for he knew that Cawl's pursuit of new inventions might lead him down the same path that 10,000 years ago brought the original Dark Mechanicum to damnation. The Primarch knew that Cawl's thirst for progress could eventually become a problem for the Imperium, and Guilliman would then have to deal ruthlessly with his old ally. To aid in achieving his goals and to focus on further research and the rediscovery of lost technologies, Belisarius created an artificial intelligence device known as Cawl Inferior. It is secretly located deep within the innards of Guilliman's mighty ancient flagship, the Macragge's Honour. The device is hidden inside a chamber that only the Primarch is permitted to enter. The massive device consists of hundreds of servo skulls, psychic blocks, and parts of evidently Xenos origin. When communicating with the Lord Commander of the Imperium, it flawlessly mimics Cawl, though it insists that it and the Archmagos are entirely different entities. Cawl Inferior strives for simple human interaction to ensure Guilliman is comfortable in its presence, thereby reducing the tension between Cawl and the Imperial Regent. Although Cawl has lived for 10,000 years, the changes to support the Archmagos' mind have distorted his body at the expense of most of his humanity. Belisarius' emotions have become ghosts within the mechanism of Cawl Inferior, which barely reflects them. Surprisingly, in the emotional expressions of this soulless machine, elements of biting humour occasionally emerge. The information conveyed by Cawl Inferior to Guilliman is essentially built into the device's structure. Certain reactions unlock access to coded messages. The device's creator endowed the machine with numerous scenarios which he, in his great wisdom and genius, had calculated mathematically. Cawl Inferior modifies these messages to give them relevance in light of current circumstances. The device's program is embedded initially. The interconnected brains and logical mechanisms occupying most of the chamber contain everything that may relate to the task set by Guilliman and Cawl. Inside Cawl Inferior, all possible outcomes are present. Despite all assurances, Guilliman does not fully trust either the device or its creator. Cawl Inferior claimed to be no abominable intelligence that possessed forbidden machine self-awareness and sentience. The entity's responses were not spontaneously generated, but predetermined by Cawl before its construction, and it violated none of the Adeptus Mechanicus's or the Emperor's technological prescriptions, since the servitor brains that partially made up the Cawl Inferior's being were organic in nature and thus sanctioned for use. Guilliman believed that Cawl Inferior might be a true machine intelligence disguising itself as a non-sentient device. The Primarch did not possess the deep technological knowledge of his brothers Perturabo, Vulcan, or Ferrus Manus, but he doubted that the Archmagos had shared the entire truth with him regarding how the mechanisms of the device functioned. Regardless of whether Cawl Inferior could think independently or not, it was still a heretical creation, violating the sacred tenets of the Adeptus Mechanicus, as it represented a mixture of Imperial and Xenos technology, and it evidently possessed psychic elements. Its existence, regardless of the benefits it provided, was yet another sign that Cawl required careful supervision to ensure he did not fall into true heresy. With the formation of the Great Rift across the Imperium, many holdings of the Adeptus Mechanicus, from mining colonies to night worlds and forge worlds, became targets of Necron attacks. The massive influx of chaos energies released by the birth of the Rift triggered anti-warp protocols on every Necron Forge world, and creations that had lain dormant for entire epochs sprang into motion once more. The infamous technomandrites of Magistrak, who had been overthrown by the Necrontyr in the distant past, returned with a fierce thirst for vengeance and a desire to reclaim power over other Necron dynasties. Despite the numerous theories that had been constructed, no one understood the reason for the Necrons' attacks on the Forge World's territories, not even the Archmagos Belisarius Cawl. Panic began to spread among the tech priests, for in addition to the enemies besieging them from without, the chaos wave born from the emergence of the Rift and the Xenos, the Necrons posed an internal threat as well. Both sides sought deposits of the strange material capable of manipulating the warp, Blackstone. It was from this material that the Cadian pylons were made. The Mechanicus had constructed numerous fortresses on deposits of this precious resource, and many strongholds found themselves on Necron tomb worlds during the awakening of their inhabitants from their slumber. Belisarius Cawl sought a way to close the Great Rift and thus dispatched his agents across the galaxy, the armies of Mars and the House Tyrannus, in an attempt to tackle the growing threat. Hundreds of battles had already been fought, and more Forge worlds were being drawn into the conflict, sending aid to their desperate brethren. Even those tech priests, who began to grasp the seriousness of the situation, were reluctant to respond to the call for help from their Imperial allies in the fight against the Necrons, fearing they might be branded as heretics. The birth of the Great Rift, which split the galaxy in two at the dawn of the Indomitus era, reactivated an ancient Necron warp beacon known as the Pharos, located on the world of Sotha in the Ultima Segmentum. This was discovered by the scythes of the Emperor, who continued to guard the ruins of Sotha after the planet was ravaged by the Djinn-Stealer cult infestation and the Hive Fleet Kraken invasion during the Second Tyrannic War. With the support of the Ultramarines and the original scythes of the Emperor, Archmagos Dominus Belisarius Cawl led an expedition to Sotha to study and possibly utilize the Pharos' technology to close the Great Rift and defeat chaos. The expedition was attacked by Djinn-Stealer cultists who had infiltrated the ranks of the scythes of the Emperor's servants. Ultimately, all remaining original Space Marines of the Chapter and Chapter Master Thracius perished in battle with the Djinn-Stealer Patriarch, whose cult summoned the Hive Fleet Kraken that had destroyed Sotha in the Second Tyrannic War. Upon reaching the Pharos, Cawl discovered that the power source of the ancient beacon was a shard of the C'tan Zahulash the Potentate. He forged a deal with the alien star god. Zahulash agreed to destroy the device by extracting its heart through the creation of a devastating miniature singularity. In return, Cawl was to free the C'tan shard from the restraints of the Necrodermis and create a portal so that the star god could finally leave Sotha. Cawl appeared to agree, but it was a ruse, as he ultimately teleported Zahulash to a distant region of the galaxy where the C'tan shard was surrounded by hostile Necron tomb worlds. Zahulash vowed vengeance against Cawl for his betrayal. The Archmagos managed to escape Sotha and gathered a vast amount of data obtained through the study of the Pharos' heart, including the locations of other similar devices and large deposits of Blackstone across the galaxy. Cawl hoped to use the acquired information to develop a technological solution capable of sealing the Great Rift once and for all. The agony of electrical discharges that disable their electronic or mechanical systems was unbearable. The power axe is a power weapon, taking the form of a single or double-edged battle axe. Power axes vary in length and construction and are made from various materials, but they are usually adamantium. When the power field, which is typically controlled by a mechanism on the handle, is activated, the blade is surrounded by a lethal corona of destructive energy. This field allows the blade to cut through flesh, bone, and most types of armor with equal ease, making the power axe an extremely effective weapon for close combat. Hissing and slithering like a nest of mechanical snakes, The mechadendrite hive engulfs the foe in dozens of steel tendrils. Lashing, stabbing and throttling, the mass of mechadendrites bloodily disassembles its victims with horrific speed. The tech priests of the Adeptus Mechanicus take the evaluation and employment of battlefield resources very seriously. So much so that many continue this work even after death, in the form of servo skulls designed for tactical analysis. Streams of binaric code relay information about the enemy's weaknesses and strengths in battle to their masters. Considered essential by many lesser tech priests, the refractor field distorts the image of the wearer with a shimmering cloak of gravitic energy. Incoming attacks that strike the field will be refracted into multispectral electromagnetic bursts that dissipate harmlessly. The field, although less reliable than that generated by a Belisarius, can stop even the most powerful directed energy attacks, such as lascannon and plasma gun fire. No matter how Archmagos's later life turned out, it is safe to say that he did more for the Imperium than any other living mortal. His motives are sometimes obscure, but there is a recurring theme, a love for humanity and a desire to free it from the shackles of ruinous powers. If Cawl succeeds, then he is a man for whom the dark gods will no longer rule the galaxy over the human race. It remains to be seen whether Belisarius Cawl has the fortitude.